Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Film Club. We're going to be talking about a 1984 film, Nightmare on Elm Street. Welcome back, John Eric.
Hello, hello.
How's it going, man? How you doing?
Oh, good. Going. It's funny. Our first episode, we were talking at the beginning about how no one's heard of this movie of To Live and Die in L.A. But today's movie is a movie that you should be shamed if you don't know about it.
Agreed. Agreed. I think even one of the lines in the later Nightmare, New Nightmare, Heather Langenkamp says, everybody knows who Freddy Krueger is. He's like Santa Claus. Which is, it's crazy, yeah.
True, because even if you haven't seen these movies, everyone, even non-horror fans, should know who Freddy Krueger is.
Yeah, he's an icon. He's one of
Yeah.
the, people conflate Michael and Jason all the time because they're masked killers and, they don't really have a personality as much as Robert Englund gives to Freddy Krueger. So it's a pretty interesting villain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of coincidental, too. I thought about it the other day. I was like, well, what can we do? And I'm like just looking at my walls, and obviously Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my favorite franchises in terms of horror, just for the imagination that goes into the kills, especially as the
Yep.
series went on. The first movie has some crazy ones, but yeah, I've got a bunch of autographs and all kinds of Nightmare on Elm Street. Like I got a freaking vinyl figure, like the pop
Those are
vinyl.
incredible. Yeah, well, it's so iconic because everyone, if you show an image of Michael Myers, it's just like, yeah, that's my like people might not know, like just a regular person that grew up in the 70s and 80s, they might, oh yeah, that's that guy from Halloween. Or yeah, of course they're gonna know Jason because of the hockey mask. But if you see Freddy Krueger, you're gonna be like, oh, it's Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, there's only ever been him.
The
Yeah.
originality of it too is just like Halloween. Don't get me wrong, Halloween, the franchise and the original movie, is one of my favorite movies of all time. And Friday the 13th, like they're really good slasher movies. But Nightmare on Elm Street, it's just like holy shit. This movie is about a guy, an unknown at the time, unknown killer, burned, disfigured killer with a freaking clawed hand who kills teenagers in their dreams, and that's fucked up.
Yeah. It's a lot different than the other ones, right?
Yeah,
not to
like
not to disparage, but like considering Friday the 13th, I've always considered as a slasher franchise to be like the probably the most generic, only because it's not
I
too.
agree. It's yeah, like even the Halloween sequels, they're not. I don't know. As a franchise as a whole, I would say the Nightmare franchise is vastly superior to Friday the 13th anyway.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
considering the latest sequels for Halloween, but that's a whole other topic for
Yeah.
some discussion.
Don't get me going on that topic. You'll never get me stopped. Holy shit.
Oh yeah, I wonder if David Gordon Green, since he quit the Exorcist sequels, I wonder if he's now going to reboot Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, boy.
Can you imagine?
They say he quit, but do you think he got shit canned after the movie did that poorly? Like it was poorly received, I guess. They just didn't want to make it look.
I wouldn't be surprised because I wouldn't be surprised if he got fired because they had him and Danny McBride had probably, or I think I had already written the last two in the trilogy. Like it's a trilogy, right? Like
Yeah,
Halloween,
yeah.
and they were banking on it making the same amount that the original Halloween did, but
It did not come
um,
out swinging, man. Yeah, they paid
no.
hundreds of millions to get the rights too.
Yeah, having Ellen Bernstein come back compared to having Jamie Lee Curtis come back for Halloween, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Anyway, sorry,
not
off
the
topic.
same. Yeah, but it's the 40-year anniversary coming up. Like we're 2024 right now. This movie came out in '84. It's crazy to think. If anybody doesn't know what this movie's about, we've kind of already went over it. Freddy Krueger was a child murderer. The parents go and torture him after he's released on a technicality. This is all just kind of backstory that's given to you throughout the film.
Yes.
And now he haunts the parents' children. It's almost like a Wes Craven's done this before in his movies where he's got some morality and he's got some religious tones in his work. The sins of the parents being passed on to the children.
Right.
I've seen similar stuff that happens, especially with morality in some horror movies. Kind of goes. They're not really that deep. Some of them, like Friday the 13th or stuff. It's just kind of like, oh, it's a popcorn flick, but you can really tell with this movie that um, Wes Craven was really trying to get as much out of it and not just be like a exploitative or like terribly violent thing. There's always seems to be like a message behind it, which I think makes this first movie so special to me. It's one of my
Oh God, yeah.
favorites from being a kid. I don't even remember when I saw it first, but I was young.
Oh, I do.
The first time you watched it, how did it affect you?
Well, I'd known about Freddy Krueger for years, uh, because I was born in '88, so I think the fifth movie came out in '88, maybe. No, wait, maybe
It was it was part four. Dream Master came out in 88. 89 was when Dream Child.
still remember in the early '90s when New Nightmare came out. I still remember that was the first image of Freddy Krueger I saw was the poster for New Nightmare outside the video store, Jumbo Video, and I
Nice.
thought, Jesus Christ, the poster alone scared the shit out of me. And my brother used to own a book called Movies from the '80s, and it has a horror section on it, horror section, and there's a picture of Freddy Krueger, and I thought, holy shit, who like that scared the shit out of me. So then, obviously, my brother's 6 years older than me. So when I was young, he was not really much into horror movies, but one of the few VHS movies that my brother owned was A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. And I either fake called in sick one day or I was actually sick. But either way, one day I was by myself at home, probably maybe 13, 10, 11, 12, 13, young enough to be alone, home alone by myself on a sick day. But anyway, I wasn't allowed to watch this movie. This was one of these movies where my parents were very, very pretty liberal in what I was allowed to watch. But I think horror movies were kind of, because they weren't fan of horror movies, they were like, no, you can't watch that, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was by myself and I said, I'm gonna watch this movie. And I think by this point I was old enough that it didn't scare the shit out of me, because Freddy Krueger had already scared the shit out of me growing up, just seeing images of him.
Yeah. He's a scary
And
looking dude.
I still remember that first day watching it and being like, "Geez, this is still an intense movie." And just yeah, over the years I've seen it maybe, God, I don't know, 3 or 4 times since. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's just
great, man.
it's so iconic.
The theme song too, like I think that kind of goes underappreciated as well. Like obviously everybody knows the Halloween theme song and things like that, but like the Nightmare on Elm Street one's very simple and also very like
The score to this movie, the entire score is just so moody, and yeah,
it's very 80s once again, like To Live and Die, but also it's very I don't know, the movie you can definitely tell it's in the 80s, like
hmm
some of the stuff in it, watching it today it's like okay, it's a little dated, but
hmm
everything
but
works for me still. Yeah. And I don't really judge art or cinema by like, oh, it's old, so it can't be good, right? It's like to me, it's interesting to get a kind of a snapshot of a place and time. And this movie, um, all the characters in it, I think that it's much different. At least one of the reasons why I like it so much is that you're kind of rooting for everybody. There's no like character who's just yeah,
like that's the problem I think with the Friday the 13th movies, is that there's so many of them and there's so many characters. Other than oh God, see, I'm gonna get chastised by horror fans here. I almost called him Johnny.
oh
It's not Johnny.
oh Kevin
Friday.
Bacon, Kevin Bacon.
Nope. Friday the 13th character that the kid Corey Feldman played him.
Oh yeah, God, yeah, I'm drawing a blank too.
Okay, you're blanking too. At least you're
I
making me feel
know
better.
because he showed Tommy Jarvis. He shows up.
Tommy
Yeah.
Jarvis. Thank you. See, like other than him in the Friday franchise, all the characters are interchangeable, and they're just all like, oh, let's have these two having sex in a sleeping bag and have Jason, which is a great kill. Don't get me wrong, and
Yeah.
the kills in Friday the 13th are hilarious and awesome and whatever. But as far as characters go, you don't really. I'm sure it's been years since I watched them, but like Nightmare on Elm Street, the original movie, you honestly from the get go, from the first scene, you care about these characters. You
Yeah.
you care about.
It's true, and like yeah, the movie um opens with Tina, who, the movie might Wes Craven, the way he constructs his film, and I think it's like pretty well paced the way everything plays out in this movie too. Like the opening scene, you almost think, okay, that's the main character, but it's not. Right? You almost think that she's the main character, but then you meet all of her friends later, of course.
And that's what
Johnny
I
Depp's
love.
first film.
Yeah, because Craven's daughter had a crush on him.
Yeah. Pick that guy. Pick that guy, Dad. Okay.
No, but I agree. That's what I was thinking too when I rewatched this a few weeks ago. It was just like this movie opens. The opening scene I loved, and that creeped me out the first time I saw it too. Was this you see him constructing the glove,
Yeah.
and it's like that in of itself that could be a nightmare. Just if you just see random, it looks like a dream slash nightmare where it's just a random shot of someone giggling as they're building this glove and then showing it off, and then the opening credit or the opening title comes, and I love that. I love a good opening
Yeah.
where the title is introduced. And then you get into the first nightmare, which is Tina's nightmare. And yeah, you're thinking this is the main character.
Yeah.
But it's those opening scenes where all the characters where she's telling them about this disfigured guy with the glove, and they don't say right off the get go that they also had the nightmare.
Yeah.
It's not until later on that it's like, oh, I had the same nightmare. And like that's what I love about this original movie
Yeah.
is that Krueger is such a mystery.
They don't. Yeah, they don't. You don't get to know anything till like what, like halfway through or whatever, when Ronnie Blakely, the mother character to Nancy, uh, gives her that big spiel about we tracked him down. He was released on a technicality, and it's
Yeah,
very soft pedaled too. Like they don't really come out and say he was a petter ass. You know?
they don't say that, and they don't say whether he was innocent or guilty. So they like it's. I just love the mystery of this original film, like of his character, his backstory, and everything. And part of the movie is just that mystery of who is this random guy that is just, or is even guys, this random monster that is just killing us. And
I
yeah,
agree. I agree. That's probably one of my favorite aspects of the movie too. Every time you go back to it, especially for me over the years, this used to be my comfort movie. Like I'm not even kidding you. When I would get sick, I'd put Nightmare. I don't know why. It sounds freaking bizarre, but I
nope,
specifically remember it.
yeah, no, that's there's some movies that they're depressing as hell. I can't name any right now, but like there's some movies that are just cynical or whatever, and they just put me in a better mood if I watch them just because they're so well made or they're so like I don't know. It's I know what you mean. I know what you mean when you say that this is a comfort movie because yeah,
Yeah, it reminds me of a time, especially the nostalgia factor for me. Like the first time I ever watched it,
there you go. Yeah.
I remember I lived up north still, and we only had a few movie stores in town, right? And this was when
Mm-hmm.
Columbia House was a thing, and my grandmother had the Columbia House, and I remember specifically I ordered New Nightmare, Beverly Hills Cop 3, which don't get me, ugh, you love the
Hey,
first one, and you,
as you think. I rewatched those last year. It's not as bad as you think, but that's another discussion. That's another day for another discussion.
yeah, another day. But yeah, I was so impatient for the first one to come in the mail because I did order New Nightmare, Beverly Hills Cop 3, and the original, which was a 2 VHS Nightmare on Elm Street thing, and it had like the deleted scenes that they talk about in the behind the scenes for the.
VHS. Those are
Yeah, it was a
rare.
duel. It was huge. It was like the Titanic, It's like that big boy. And I remember being so impatient, and I don't remember if it was a PD day or was it the summer or what was happening, but it was a rainy day, just a shitty day, and my cousin and I think, were hanging out And I'm like, I can't wait any longer for his Columbia House for this stuff to come in. I'm just gonna go to the variety store. We went to the variety store. We rented A Nightmare on Elm Street. We watched it in my grandmother's basement, and that very afternoon, the cassette came in the mail, and
Oh,
then
that's
in the rain. And I remember bringing it home, and then I started watching the behind the scenes, and that's when I just got obsessed because I was like, I just watched the movie. It was fresh in my mind, and then I got to see like kind of the behind the scenes camera tests that they were doing, which some of it was actually pretty creepy because I remember it was kind of Robert Englund in full Freddy makeup, and he was kind of in the boiler room, and he's just walking to and from the camera, but in like
oh
character,
God,
and
for
like
Tess.
yeah, and it was for tests, and it was just like the way it looked and the lighting and all that stuff, and it was absolutely terrifying because as a kid you're just like, there's a scary man with a razor glove running towards the camera. Even behind the scenes, I was just like, oh my god, it's interesting. And yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. What can we say about this movie that hasn't already been said a million times? It's
We're just talking about it. And we're talking about how great it is, and yeah, sharing our like memories about it. So yeah, it's one of those movies where we can't really say anything. Like you said, like I don't know.
I
It's
have
just funny you said about that behind the scenes of Robert England just walking to and from. And it's just like, can you imagine as an actor? I mean, he was typecast and he's a great actor,
yeah.
but it's just funny because these movies just kept him employed as an actor in the 80s, and he could probably up his salary for
Oh
each
my
one,
god,
right?
yeah. I would imagine so. I know they didn't want to bring him. So just stupid knowledge I have just from watching all the. If you've ever,
See, great thing that about this podcast too is that even if people longtime Nightmare fans are watching, they're like, "Yeah, I already knew that." I'm I've been a fan for years, but any knowledge you have will 99% probably be new to me. So
I can share some stuff I know that I have in my memory just from
yeah,
things. But if you've never seen it, it's like a 4 hour documentary on the whole Nightmare on Elm Street series called Never Sleep Again.
I've heard of it. I've seen people rate it on Letterbox, and I've always wanted to. There's the Crystal Lake Memories one for Friday the 13th
Yep,
too.
yep.
I would 100% like. I want to watch the Nightmare one before I would get into the Friday one because yeah,
They're both good. I can attest to that. I've watched both of them. And the Nightmare, they're very, very thorough. They go chronological. And so you can watch just snippets of, like, okay, I just want to watch the making of Dream Warriors, right? And they
yeah,
just cover everything. And they get as much of the cast and crew and everybody involved. And they just recall the stories of making it. And um, that's how I got my Heather Langenkamp, Nancy autograph. Because I think she was the producer on Never Sleep Again, or she was one of the executives. And yeah, so when you pre-ordered it, that's how I got her autograph. And yeah, man, it's very, very cool. Um, very thought-provoking because you get to see, I don't know, the Nightmare on Elm Street's always interested me in that sense too, like the story of Wes Craven, R.I.P. as well.
oh my
Another
god,
one. I wish I would have got to meet the guy. I know he came to Fan Expo in Toronto a couple years,
oh,
many
see, I
years
thought
ago.
you met Robert England, right?
I met him at Fan Expo. Yeah,
That's amazing.
that would have
That's see,
been
that's
probably around
I want
2008.
Craven. I don't know why, but I thought you had met Wes Craven, but
He's one of the ones, yeah, I didn't get to meet. It was very regrettable now too.
such an interesting career, and he was just so cool. And he apparently I own was it Deadly Friend? I own that on Blu-ray.
Yes,
Yeah, you can laugh.
I know about
The
Deadly Friend. Yeah,
It's interesting because that's the reason I blind bought it. I just bought it because I thought, you know what? I've never heard of this movie. It's Wes Craven, so whatever, I'll watch it. And it was bad,
yeah,
but it's interesting because it just shows how he didn't want to make it a horror movie. He didn't want to make a horror movie. He wanted to make a completely different movie. And producers and everything were like, "No, you're the Nightmare on Elm Street guy.
yeah.
We're making this a horror movie." So then, like, it's funny because I hardly ever watch, and I should, the extra footage on Blu-ray and DVDs, but I watched this one and I watched an interview with what's her name, Christy Swanson.
Okay, yeah,
which it was one of her first movies, and she starts because it was soon after I think Wes Craven had passed that this Blu-ray come out, or when the recording was. But she starts getting so emotional about how great a man he was, like as a director, and just how like yeah, super professional and cool he was on set.
Yeah.
And it just made me think it's so funny that he made these horrific movies. Yeah, it was like I wish I could watch a four like just footage of the making of this movie because it would just be so cool to see them making these horrific scenes, but him probably being so super chill and cool and nice and yeah.
Yeah, he definitely was. Like I know him, like obviously everyone knows John Carpenter like just says whatever's on his mind and doesn't give two shits, which I really like. Wes Craven's also like listening to I listened to the audio commentary when rewatching this Nightmare on Elm Street again. And yeah, just hearing him, he's very articulate, and I read his biography years ago, and yeah, he never really wanted to do. He didn't want to keep doing horror films. It's just he kind of like accepted it. Like horror just kind of chose me, and it's
Yep.
been pretty good for me, which is pretty admirable. I mean,
Name as your English professor.
yeah, he's he's been yeah, like I don't know, he's very articulate. I really wish I would have got to meet him because when I did meet Robert at Fan Expo, he had some interesting things to say about Freddy because I think what's so special about the first movie that gets lost later in the series, especially, is like you don't really see too much of him in the first one. Like we were talking about how mysterious he is, but even when he's in frame, he's kind of in the shadows. You know what I mean?
It's great. Yeah, you have that one iconic shot of him cutting his own finger off.
Yes.
But other than that, you're right. Like like there's that one shot I remember seeing of him when he's chasing her, and he's the way he's running is just in shadows, but it's so terrifying.
Yes. I call that the Wagga Wagga run, the cokehead run. You know, when you're in downtown London and somebody's chasing you down an alleyway, that's like the most nightmare fuel type of run you could possibly do, right?
Downtown London, don't get me started on the amount of people that could chase you nowadays.
Put Freddy to shame, jeez. But but yeah, he's very scary in this movie, and he doesn't talk a lot. He still has some lines. I remember writing an essay way back in the day on this series, and it was comparing the original to the remake, which I'm not going to get into today either because I don't want to get into a negative space because I think the remake was pretty rotten in most aspects. There's some good things about it, obviously, like
I don't remember it. I just remember thinking, "There's a movie.
yeah,
That was a movie there."
that's one of the movies of all time.
I'm like, I remember actually being. Oh yeah, we said we wouldn't talk about it, but I just I remember thinking, oh, I actually kind of looking forward to this, other than the Friday the 13th remake.
Yes.
But I just remember thinking, yeah, this is like, why?
And it didn't do anything really new or creative. Like for everything we just said we liked about the original, how mysterious Freddy is, and you know how they
Yeah,
don't touch on all that stuff and they just kind of leave it up for interpretation. The remake, to me, again, it's just an opinion. You can flame me in the chat if you want, people, but yeah, I thought them kind of talking about, oh yeah, it's pretty much like they watch Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors with groundskeeper Willie as Freddy, and then they decided we'll put that into the Nightmare on Elm Street canon in the 2010 remake.
whether
Yeah. Fuck. I'm surprised he didn't turn into a tractor at the end, and you know, it's ridiculous.
no, it took itself too seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
this movie takes itself seriously, but the original movie, but like that movie took itself way too seriously. It was like a DC movie at the time when Marvel was making movies. It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And how do you make a wall effect worse? Like remember when he comes out of the wall, that iconic
I
shot?
don't remember. I don't like all honestly. All I remember is Rooney Mara, who I love,
Yeah.
and Jackie Haley, who's great.
It's
And
just not the
I
best movie.
honestly don't movie. I don't remember. I watched it the one time. I didn't even see it in theaters. I rented it when it first came out, and yeah,
Yeah, they ruined the shot where Freddy comes out of the wall because in the original, right, Heather's asleep, and then
Mhm.
he kind of projects out of the wall, which they use spandex and they just stretched it out. and it looks
I remember
fantastic.
I rewatched Nightmare a few weeks ago, thinking, "Wow,
It's a
for
great shot.
1980s, that is amazing." And like, I always try to think of if you're a really young kid watching this movie for the first time, that would be terrifying. Like, I was pretty young when I saw this movie, but I was old enough to not be scared by it.
Yeah,
Like, I was probably 12 or 13 when I first saw this movie.
you know he's not going to get you, but it still can.
I can just imagine back in the 80s, if you were 8 or 9 or and just watching this movie, that scene is just the stuff of nightmares. Like, it's, oh God, that shot, sorry, the of him coming out of the wall.
Yeah, and it was beautiful because that's
Still, still stands up.
yeah,
Still stands up.
that's what I'm saying. Like that shot compared to the remake, the remake they use CGI, and you know when you overuse CGI, especially I don't know nowadays people have a good eye for the human eye just picks up on the imperfection of it, and it was like an
Absolutely.
articulated Freddy coming out of the wall, and it just looks so stupid. I remember when I talked to Robert Englund. This is only anecdote because I'm not fucking, I'm not gonna brag. Oh, I talked to Robert like we're friends or something. But when
No,
I asked him
you didn't
one
call me
question.
Rob. If you had said it when I talked to Rob, that would have been
Me and Bobby Englund, we had a great conversation. But I didn't waste his time, right? Because at those conventions you get like 100 thousands of people asking you questions every day, and some people just go on and on. So I said, I'm just gonna ask you one question because I know you're busy, and I said, I talked to stupid me because I was younger. I was like, what?
hmm
I asked him about the remake, and I said, I prefer the original because saying something along the lines of, you're always in the shadows. And I'm going back to the essay I wrote on it before. I think he only has like 40 lines of dialogue. Like he says like 50 something words in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Whereas the remake, you have Jackie Earle Haley going on fucking monologues. Not his fault, right? It's not his fault.
No,
He's a good actor.
he
But
is.
but the script was just they didn't understand. In the first scene, you're jumping out, and you know it's not reality. You're already kind of losing the essence of what Wes Craven did in the original that made it, and especially like the later movies got really creative with blurring the lines of what's when it's shifting from reality to dream world, right?
Well, even this movie, I remember like early on, I think it's right after Tina's initial where they're walking down the street and you hear the children
Yes,
scream.
yes.
It's like, and even the ending of this movie,
It leaves you wondering, eh? Like,
it's always like I've notoriously when I was younger, I hated movies which ended with the bad guy winning.
yeah,
So I hated Seven when I first saw it when I was again 13, 14. That was another movie I had to sneak watch, but anyway, that's another story. But there's just movies that I became like I didn't like movies where the bad guy won in a sense.
yeah,
But in this movie, I watching it the other day, I was just like, holy shit, that would be a gut punch.
yeah.
Because I've seen it several times now, but like I don't know, like it's hard to explain, but like it's such a great movie in the sense that if this hadn't had any sequels, if this just had tanked and whatever, and this had been its own movie, can you imagine that ending where it's just like, holy shit, was this whole movie just an entire nightmare, a dream, like what
That
the
is a theory that some people, even
hell?
Robert Englund, had talked about that in interviews before. That some people theorize that the whole movie is Nancy's nightmare before it starts to
That would make
happen.
sense. That
Which,
would make sense because apparently what dreams are dreams they feel well now we're getting into inception but like they feel like hours and hours and hours and hours long but they're only 20 something minutes or not even 20 something minutes they're what 2 minutes long or
yeah, the like how relative the dreams are too, right? Like
yep
when you just said, yeah, the shot after Tina's first dream, then it cuts,
shot
and the
one more
camera does a
time
lot of crazy stuff. Like it's
yes
overexposed. It's like the kids are skipping rope, they're singing the nursery rhyme, 1 2, Freddy's come for you,
blurriness
and then the camera does not cut, and it
yeah
pans over, it dollies over. They're doing a bunch of Great. You know what I'll give the movie too? It's really well shot. You compare it to like Friday the 13th, like the original. Nightmare on Elm Street looks nice. Like it's a nice looking horror
The
film.
the original Friday the 13th to me always seems like just an exploitation movie.
It
It
really
just
much
always
is, yeah.
seems it's great, but like yeah, you're right. This movie is just so well shot. It's so professionally made, and that's a Wes Craven movie
Yep.
because like this was his what third movie?
So, yeah, I know he
Can't be
did.
before
Oh God, I know Last House on the Left, Last House, and then yeah,
now.
The Hills
Was
Have
this
Eyes.
before Eyes?
I think The Hills Have Eyes was late 70s. I don't know.
Okay,
I'd have to look that up. I'm pretty sure The
because
Hills Have
Last
Eyes is
House,
before this.
the Last House on the Left had a very exploitation film feel to it, and it
Very.
was still really good.
Yeah,
But
The
it's
Hills
not
Have
like
Eyes is 77.
77.
Yeah,
Okay, and this was 84.
yeah. So yeah, he done a few before this. I think this is honestly one of his best, like in terms of his horror movies. I love New Nightmare as well, but
I can't wait to rewatch New Nightmare and Scream. I love, but I
yeah,
kind of have a love hate relationship with Scream. I feel like New Nightmare was Scream. Like it's more of a self referential and just it's just I think New Nightmare's better than Scream.
yeah,
And
and it came out before Scream too, right? What was the original Scream was like 96. New Nightmare was 94,
and
and
I feel that was the first horror film to be like look in at the horror genre and just like New Nightmare is so good. I can't wait to watch it again.
yeah, New Nightmare is fantastic. I love that movie, and Freddy's legitimately creepy again, which is something that differentiates as the series goes on. You know, when they start to make him busting out the one-liners and doing all that shit as time goes on. It's a very fine line to balance, right? Once you go too far, but in the
Right.
original, in this one, he's very creepy. It's it's
Yeah. And
interesting.
by part six, he's wearing the Nintendo
Power.
Power Glove.
Now you're playing with power. Yeah, and he's winking at the kid. It's pretty much like I get it. That's the last movie. They're quote unquote. You know, this is our final kick at the can. Might as well just you know
Yeah.
pull it apart, blow it up, make it stupid as hell. Roseanne Barr, you gotta love her, and Tom Arnold for God's sakes.
Forgot to on that. I've only seen it once.
Alice
Seen that.
Cooper as the dad as well. He,
Cooper's in it.
he plays Freddy Krueger's abusive stepfather or something. He whips him in a flashback scene.
It's so funny as we're recording this and as we're talking about this movie. I just like I said earlier that I remember my first time watching Nightmare on Elm Street,
Yeah.
but it just dawned on me that was not the first Elm Street movie I watched. It was part five. It was The Dream Child, and that's why when I first saw Nightmare on Elm Street, I wasn't that afraid of Freddy Krueger anymore.
Yeah.
And it was because I saw The Dream Child first. So The Dream Child is just come on.
He tried, eh? He gave it the college try. I mean, I think, in terms of the sequels, especially, part 4 was like just on the precipice of going too far, but
Very, but that the bug scene, the bug death in part four,
oh man.
that was holy shit. I remember watching that and being like, Jesus Christ.
That's beautiful though in the sense of like, I remember the special effects artist. He's like, yeah, it's much more fun working on Nightmare on Elm Street compared to Friday the 13th because you're like, okay, it's not a machete to the face, it's I'm turning a girl into a cockroach and she's in a bug trap, like it's much more imaginative. And part 4 also, like, it doesn't have a very good script because I know the writer's strike was going on in 88 when they made it, and Rennie Harlan, also Mr. Deep Blue Sea and Cliffhanger. Whew. He like
Love that.
yeah, me too. He added that once. It's like made it a very visually nice movie, like a lot of crazy cuts, a lot of crazy camera movements and all that. But the one part in that movie where I thought was fantastic, and it's like similar to what we were talking about in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, where you don't know if you're asleep or awake, is when you have that cycle. I don't know if you remember this in part 4, the Dream Master, when the character Alice runs around the corner and she's going to meet her boyfriend Dan, and they're in front of the Crave Inn restaurant.
Is that Patricia Arquette?
She's in part 3, but it's her her character's already got offed in this next movie, right? Because she didn't come back for part 4.
Right. See, right at the starting.
Yeah, but this scene's really cool because it's like it repeats itself, and so she's like, "Okay, get in the car. I'm driving," and then they get in the car and they start to take off. And this is in the Roach scene, and they're going to save their friend, but then it cuts back again, and it's like a loop. She runs around the corner. Okay, get the keys. I'm driving. And then by the third time, you're like, "Holy fuck, they're already asleep." Like, you can't do the same thing.
Cool. That's why I remember liking 4, but yeah, see, I didn't realize that there was the writer's strike going on, and that makes total sense because it just 4 seemed like it could have been great, like 3, but
Yeah,
it just
yeah. 3 was like, I think that's what a lot of people like. Most people I talk to, they're like, "Oh yeah, Dream Warriors is the best." I like Dream Warriors, a lot, but I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. Like I still think up at like Nightmare 1 to 4, I find all really interesting in different ways.
yep,
And New
absolutely.
Nightmare I like a lot. I don't really like care for part 5 because it's weird and gothic and it doesn't really make a lot of sense with the rest of the series. And like we said with 6, it's just you can't really just taking the piss out of itself.
Like, yeah, 5, I just remember there was the comic book where he
Yes.
turns it's got some cool things to it. And I remember when I first watched it on TV, I actually watched that for the first time, and I remember I jumped in late, but the first image I saw was of the girl eating herself to death. And that kind of was like, I was really young when I saw that because this is before I even saw the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it was just like, oh shit. But yeah, 5 and 6 are just so, they're just, well, 5 jump from 5 to 6. 6 is just in a whole other ballpark by itself.
Yeah. We don't talk about 6. Just when I was a kid too, this kind of personal anecdote, but it's stupid. I didn't because I lived in a small town, right? We only got certain movies and shit, and I didn't know Part 5 existed. So I thought Part 5 was Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, Part 6, and then one day I went over to a friend's house or a family member's house, and I go, "What the heck? The Dream Child part part 5?" And like it just felt like one of those weird Twilight Zone moments, and then I of course had to watch it, and I was disappointed because at that point I was already a big Nightmare on Elm Street fan, and it does have some cool scenes in it. I think they all do to some extent, but the original
Yeah.
is so well shot and so creative, and like they call that movie the house. Yeah, they call New Line Cinema the house that Freddy built, right? Because before
Right.
that,
Shay.
yeah, Mr. Robert Shea.
Robert Shay is the teacher.
Yes, and now she's what? How many movies of Insidious has she been in? Even though she dies in the first one, she's back for another one. She's one of the ghosts in this in the next one. I don't know.
Oh, it was awful.
Oh God, they get worse and worse as I go. Yeah, Robert Shea. I think that's the only reason why Wes Craven said that as well. The ending to Nightmare on Elm Street was just supposed to be the kids go off and it's done.
But instead, they have the Freddy car take them, and then the mom just get grabbed into
Yeah,
the house.
that was his compromise, right? Because before they made this movie, before Robert Shea got the money to fund it, he
Mm-hmm.
Wes Craven had been shopping the script around for years, and everybody said it's dreams. Nobody's gonna find it scary. So it was his compromise. He said, "Hey, you got my movie made. I'll give you an ending." So potential sequel, and obviously now they call it the house that Freddy built. So it was a gamble.
Do up New Line Cinema because for me, New Line Cinema is always that classic of the film reels coming together.
Yes. Yeah.
But for that first Nightmare on Elm Street with that, just it's almost like freaking MTV punk rock, just the red
Yes.
shuddering New Line Cinema presents, and it's just like, oh Jesus.
It is like, yeah. I mean, I remember people saying like at the time they thought Wes Craven was kind of like a David Lynch type, and yeah, this movie like it's not going full, dancing lady in the radiator Eraserhead vibe, but it's like it is like we said moments where you don't really know if it's a dream or reality, especially the ending of the movie with the kids skipping rope, and earlier in the movie the kids skipping rope, and you have that, just the moment where Johnny Depp walks out of the bush when Nancy's already asleep, evidently, but why is he talking to her in her dream? It's one of those, like, I'm trying to understand it, but it's also a dream, so you can let it have some leeway, right? Which I think Wes Craven was great at doing in the first one. It's like where I feel like other ways it could have really been blundered, and a lot of times the easiest way to say is just look at the remake, but I'm not going to go there today. Just look at the remake for how not to do it. But yeah, a lot of practical effects too, like the wall, Freddy coming out of the wall, and also obviously one of the most iconic kills, Tina getting dragged up the wall. Well, that was all practical as well, right? So it's crazy too if you ever watch the behind the scenes or watch that documentary Never Sleep Again. It's a rotating room that was perfectly balanced, so when she's getting dragged, she's just kind of letting gravity do its trick. Everything else is bolted to the ground, and the room's actually spinning. So,
and you feel so bad for the the character that gets arrested and then hung.
oh yeah, Nick Corey, or Jesus Garcia, his real name.
And you imagine just waking up to that, like that is just terrifying. Like just not knowing what to do. There's no one in the room.
Yep.
All he sees, and then the door being locked. Yeah, that's such a terrifying scene.
Freddy fucking. It's kind of smart the way it plays out though too, because like later in the movie, you have the John Saxon, the cool. I don't know. I always thought his character was like, even though the mother and the father are kind of at odds the whole movie, you understand where each of them kind of come from, and I always liked that John Saxon wanted to be there for Nancy.
He doesn't know what to do.
But he doesn't. Yeah, he's like, okay, obviously it's not Freddy Krueger. He obviously killed her, right? Because it looks like it. But the way it plays out is, again, a lot of morality, and it's interesting, especially near the end of the movie when, to me, got to talk about it a little bit, just because, yes, it's technically not the defeating of Freddy because we know there's more sequels, but at least the ending of this movie.
I liked that too. On the rewatch too, what I thought about the final ending is that I've always thought this movie was terrifying, but I've always thought that towards the end, when she home alones him, it kind of loses. It kind of loses that bit of like that terrifyingness when she. Because I remember I even like 2 weeks ago when I rewatched it, when she like punches him, he makes this like, oh, this is like, I kind of laughed out loud. I was like, oh, come on,
Freddy, you're better than this.
Horror here now. Like it just didn't seem. It just loses it a bit. For when she's winning, it's kind of like, this movie isn't scary anymore.
Yeah, she's taking him out.
Though. Yeah, exactly. And it is cool how she takes the advice from Johnny Depp and she says, I'm turning my back on you. And then he disappears and he goes into, and that is very cool. But to have that final thing at the end where he wins and he has the car thing and then the mom.
Yeah.
That's why I originally, because of the Home Alone part at the end, I had this at 4.5 for the longest time. And then I thought, no, I said to myself, fuck you. Like, this is iconic movie. This is a 5-star movie. And that ending is what makes it a 5-star movie. That ending is what brings it back to the horror and brings it back to Freddy being Freddy and terrifying.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you made a really good point about, like, yeah, the booby traps. Like, for a moment there, it almost starts to become, like, I don't want to say comical, but, like, yeah, when her and Johnny Depp talk about it, she's like, yeah, I'm into survival. And she doesn't need a man.
Love the scene on the bridge with her and Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
That is very cool. But it's the actual when she's setting up the booby traps and then the
montage, the Kevin McAllister montage.
Scenes, I'm just like, oh, come on.
Wes Craven, I think, just was into booby traps.
What's that, sorry?
I think Wes Craven was just into like booby traps and stuff like that because he does it. He's like, I remember in an interview, he's like laughing about it because Last House on the Left, the parents set up traps for the killers.
I never thought of that.
The Hills Have Eyes. The the family who gets stranded and attacked by the family. They set up traps for the.
Me too.
So it's like, yeah, he he just low key in his mind he wanted to make another Home Alone type. Because yeah, it still takes me out. Like everything up until this point in Nightmare on Elm Street, I love the scene when she starts setting up the booby traps and it's a montage, and then
Not bad. It's when he falls into them.
oh yeah,
There's that one scene where he either gets hit in the stomach or everything or something, and like Robert Englund makes this. Oh, no, laughed out loud. I'm like, oh, come on, you just turned him into a cartoon character.
you're better, you're tougher than that, Fred. It's
Exactly.
fucking hilarious.
I was thinking about it too, and I was just thinking about like the whole point of this movie is living up to your fears, and that at that ending, maybe Craven was trying to make him look comical. Maybe he was trying to say, "Hey, this guy is not that scary. He's an actual guy." So that's why I gave it leeway, and like I said, no, yeah, this is a perfect film because I laughed out loud at that reaction at him getting punched in the gut, but it was just like, okay, well, this is the first time you see Freddy Krueger actually as a villain who can be defeated.
Yeah,
So,
playing by the realities rules, right? Which is
so I still laugh at it, but I didn't see that would be a good question to ask Wes Craven, but it's R.I.P. It's too bad he's
yeah, too
yeah,
bad,
but
sad.
no, the ending brings it full circle, and I love that it ends on Freddy winning because yeah, it brings it back to the hey, this is a nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and the title, if you really want to look at it literally and go back to that theory about it all being one, you know, precognitive dream, is a nightmare on Elm Street. It's not nightmares on Elm Street, but that's just nitpicking, going bit, get out the beret and sweater vest, and we're really gonna deep dive into this. But yeah, like I think my favorite thing about the movie, looking back, and especially that talking with other people about it, is like the Halloween had its resurgence, and like Jamie Lee Curtis, Scream Queen, and obviously Halloween, important to the slasher genre. It's one of the biggest. And 1978, I think the only ones that really came before that inspired that type of thing would probably be like Black Christmas. Also had John Saxon as a cop in it.
Oh wow.
So yeah, going kind of where I was going with that is that we have the character of Laurie in Halloween being like the Scream Queen, and I always thought that Nancy Heather Langenkamp in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, she's got to be even a level up in terms of Scream Queen. No shade to Jamie Lee Curtis, but in terms of like the character itself, because whereas Laurie, if we're just talking about originals, right, we're not going to get into the whole canon of what part is canon and which part is the David Gordon Green trilogy and all that stuff and the later nightmares. Let's just talk isolated. Halloween 1978, Nightmare on Elm Street 84. The character of Nancy, I would say, is more of a Scream Queen and a final girl, like more resourceful, and ultimately more of a badass, because whereas Laurie Strode is a character who is resourceful, and she is able to escape and get the better of Michael in a few scenes with just, oh, here's a knitting needle, here's a knife, she gets out. Whereas Nancy's character isn't so much about I'm getting out or I'm just barely surviving. It's I'm taking the fight to him. I'm going in the dreams, and Wes Craven sets us up in the movie that takes when she she gets cut in the dream. Well, we know this. She gets cut in reality. She takes his hat out. Now she has his hat in the real world. This whole build-up, it's like it takes its time, and even though it's absolutely fucking insane, it has a set of rules, which I think is the reason why the movie is like any good in the first place, right? Because it could be like, okay, well, it's everything in the kitchen sink. There's no rules to it. It's just crazy and it's scary and blue, blue, blah, blah, right?
That's interesting because yeah, final girls. It's almost like Laurie Strode is a final girl just because she was the last one that he was about to kill, and now she's just screaming and being like, I gotta survive. I gotta." But you're right. Like Heather Langenkamp, she's just like, no, I'm like it's not happened yet. It's not he's not in the dream where she's the final girl.
Yeah.
She decides beforehand, I'm not gonna let him do this. I'm gonna fight back.
I'm not going down like I've seen my friends
Exactly.
and yeah, and her going in, setting the alarm clock.
Like that's why I like Tina as the like she's the first girl that gets killed. Tina is trying to plead with her friends, being like, "This guy's trying to kill me," and
Yeah.
I woke up. This guy, like, I had wounds. This is serious, guys, and she's pleading. She's not some just carbon copy victim that gets killed in a horror movie. She like that's why Tina in the original Nightmare on Elm Street is so good,
Yep.
and the actress is really good too because it's just like you don't want her to die. Like you see her in the first scene
Yeah.
in the first nightmare, and you're like, oh, thank God she survived, and now she's talking to her friends and telling them and blah blah blah, and then when she actually does die, it is truly horrific
Yeah.
because wow, she already survived that first one, and now she's getting dragged on the ceiling, and then boom.
Yeah. Brutal.
So that it almost makes you, yeah, like Nancy even more because it's just like now you're just thinking, good God,
Yeah. You don't want to see what happened to her happen
yeah,
to Nancy. And yeah, the kid, I don't know how they must have all got along, but like even for it being Johnny Depp's first movie, the scene when she is telling Nancy and he's playing with the tape player and stuff,
oh,
it seems like Friends. You know what I mean? Like it seems like this
but I
isn't
love
a
that
shitty
scene.
movie.
Exactly, and I love that scene because I love how Depp's character and in one of the scenes he runs away and says, and just the acting too. I forget what he says, but he says something, and then she yells, "So you had the same nightmare too?"
Yeah, and then he just runs off. He never says anything else. That's when they're at the school. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
it's just
great
like that.
scene and just leaves
Just
that question lingering.
so much better than Friday the 13th.
Yeah, it's like yeah, this movie is. I don't want to say it's like an elevated slasher movie, but it really does like try. Like you can tell Wes
It
Craven really
is
tried.
because of what it became. Yeah,
Some people might say yeah, it's yeah, because as the series goes on, you can't say there's that attention to detail or quality as this. The consistent stories in each movie became inconsistent, and the character and the rules became, you know, every movie is pretty much a different set of rules. They change just as much as like the characters do. Like as the later movies went on, it's like okay, this guy does karate, and in his dreams he's gonna karate Freddy, and this guy likes video games, and this guy's a comic book guy, and
exactly.
it's
So
just became very formulaic as time went on.
yeah, let's make money.
Yeah. Which I mean, it made a fuck ton, so can't. They were
Yeah,
pumping
it
those
did.
movies out. What this came out in '84. By '89, they were already making part five. Like that's crazy, and
Yeah,
great on Robert Englund because I know from listening to commentaries and stuff too. He Wes Craven wanted an older actor originally, but then then realized, hey, a lot of older actors are they've seen too much of life. They're a little soft, and Robert Englund was younger, and he just brought an energy to Freddy that I don't know. I'd like to think maybe one day they'll try to do something new with the character and somebody will kill it. But
but it's tough. This isn't James Bond, right?
yeah, that's
That's why, like, that's proof that you can put James Earl Haley in a movie, and he's a creepy actor, and he's a great actor. But you
hashtag not
know,
my Freddy.
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, it's
You
it's the same.
you're not wearing a mask. You're wearing makeup, but you're not wearing like Jason doesn't have any lines. You can any linebacker or any can fill in the role of Jason. Like that's why it's so funny. Like Kane Hodder, he's my favorite Jason. It's like I'm probably saying his name wrong.
Hotter.
Hodder, thank you.
He's imposing. Like I've seen. I
Not imposing. Like Jason doesn't have any lines, right? You don't really have to do much for Jason
no.
in Michael Myers.
Yeah. Move slowly. Move menacingly.
and I don't mean to shit on the actors or the characters, but like Freddy Krueger is the that's the reason Freddy Krueger is probably the most iconic, even more so than Jason, the most iconic horror character of the 80s for sure, and of all time, because Freddy Krueger is Freddy Krueger, and to me it'll always be Robert Englund. But
Yeah, I would agree. I think like it's one of those performances and one of those things that like it's become part of like the zeitgeist, right? Like part of like it's a in the 80s Nightmare on Elm Street. It was huge. They even have a huge part of the documentary that talks about that. And nowadays, although we haven't had one in years, everybody still knows who Freddy is. He's the personality. It's like a bigger, larger than life lightning in a bottle type idea that if it wasn't for this movie, you wouldn't have so many great great movies. Like I think it's one of the better series in terms of slashers, and
absolutely, yeah.
the original is one of my favorites of all time.
But I love that you have the original and then you have Full Circle with New Nightmare.
Yes, New Nightmare is like the perfect. Sometimes I just watch. I'm in the mood, like the mind, where it's like I'll just watch the original, and then I could just watch New Nightmare, because even Wes Craven said it. He said when they brought him back, right? They brought him back for this one. He only co-wrote part 3. He originally wrote a script for part 3, and they said it was too dark. They wanted to bring it into like more of a fantasy type setting and more fun, right? Dream Warriors, which it does start to go down that route. But when he came back in New Nightmare, he said, I watched all the sequels, and I could not make any sense of it. So I'll bring it into the real world, and yeah, that's truly when you're like, okay, Wes Craven, he's had some not so great movies, but when you like see New Nightmare and you see the original, it's just like, god damn, those are some of the best. Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
and he managed to make Freddy scary again, and Robert Englund Robert Englund there painting his picture of Freddy in New Nightmare. He's like, there's
Calmly.
yeah, he's like,
He's so good as himself in that movie. Oh my god.
he's great, man. I love Robert Englund, man.
The horror awards, this is getting off topic, but
I have not. What is it about?
it's not a movie. This was years ago, and I've been meaning to watch them. I was looking up when I was huge into Vincent Price a few years ago.
Yeah.
I looked up his filmography on Letterbox, and I saw the horror awards, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" And it's this award show from the '90s that was hosted by Robert Englund.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Damn.
and apparently it's on YouTube. Apparently it's a 3-hour thing it's hosted by Robert Englund, and it's just all about the best horror movies of that time. And
I'm gonna have to check this out then, because yeah, anything with Robert Englund in it, I'm interested.
I'm trying to look it up right now, but
Yeah, yeah, man. Robert Englund was great in this role. A really nice guy in real life too. From the one time I met him.
wish I could have met him.
Yeah, it was crazy. I remember the day they were like, it was after the time when you would just stand in a line for 4 hours. You'd actually just press a button, and then it would give you a number and a queue, and then you'd be like, okay, I'm number 527, and then you could just kind of walk around the convention and then come back, and it's like, now he's seeing 350 to 400, and you can kind of every half an hour you can kind of poke back. So I ended up waiting several hours to meet him, but yeah, he was a really nice guy. At least that's the last time I was there. This would have been like 2008, 2000. No, it couldn't have been that. Anyway, yeah, it was a while ago. God, I can't even remember. It would have been around the 2010s probably.
I know Niagara Falls has a Horror on the Falls convention.
Yeah, they can be cool. It's just, a lot of the time I find that if I go to those things, I get mostly everything I want done in a day. So, like the travel ones, like once upon a time I went to Massachusetts with a buddy of mine. I drove the whole way, 10-hour car ride from here in Canada all the way to Worcester, Massachusetts, and met some of the people from the Halloween movies, and met Bill S. Preston or Alex Winters. Sorry. Yeah, it was a cool time, but like,
But not dead.
but not getting off topic too much. But yeah, it was.
Sorry, I started it with the horror awards.
Oh yeah, but it's like you go to these things and like that was kind of a destination vacation type thing. I rented the hotel for like 2 days, and after like one day, I'm like, no, I got everything. I met the people I wanted to meet. I got what I wanted. Some people just sit there all day and schmooze with celebrities. I'm like, just give them a goddamn break, man. Like, yeah, sometimes people just do want to talk with them all day, but it's like they're humans too, right?
Right, exactly.
So, um, back to Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't really know if there's anything you want to say about it more than what we've already been over.
No.
Love me some Nightmare on Elm Street. Um,
Film. We're talking about one of the best horror films of all time. So yeah.
yep. Great soundtrack, great cinematography, great performances from a relatively unknown cast, barring, John Saxon and Ronnie Blakely. I guess she gets shot at the end of Nashville. Spoiler alert, the Robert Altman film, remember? Playing the alcoholic mother in this one, but I thought she did a good job too. Like the parents, it's very, very Wes Craven for Nancy to put her mother to bed.
Yeah, very sympathetic.
Yeah, like everybody in this movie, you don't want to see what happens to them, right? Like you're hoping for the best, which is I think is just in and of itself enough that puts it miles above a lot of other contemporaries because you have those characters who are just stereotyped. Oh, I'm the jock who's rude, so we're just waiting for him to get machete to the head, right? Or I'm the stoner character and I'm kind of funny, but they're gonna get got because that's the rules of those movies. Where Nightmare on Elm Street, at least the original, was I care about all these characters and they're generally good people. And yeah, great movie and overall really good series as well. Any closing thoughts?
Uh, Not really. Like, yeah, just I'm glad you said, hey, let's do Nightmare on Elm Street for the next movie because it's like, oh, I can't even remember the last time I watched this. So, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one to go back to every now and then. I didn't watch it for a few years as well. Like I would occasionally put them on in the background, but not actively watch. You know what I mean? Like walking around,
Right.
going around my house, I'd have something on the background. This time I sat down and watched it. I'm like, yeah, man. After I marathoned all the Friday the 13th in the summer, and I like back to back, I watched the original Friday the 13th, and then I put on Nightmare on Elm Street. I was just like, man, the cinematographer Jacques Heitkin in Nightmare just crushes it. Like the colors and the everything. It's just so much better.
This was the first elevated horror. I think you mentioned elevated horror before elevated horror. This is the first, like you said, elevated slasher.
Yeah, like you have Black Christmas and you have Halloween, which obviously Halloween's everybody knows and loves the original. Um, to me, Nightmare's just there. It's like love it, and yeah, definitely one of the most influential slasher horror movies. Like I said, of all time.
Yeah.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. On that note, man, you have a good night.
You as well.
Sleep tight.
Thanks again for yeah. I'm coming to watch part 2, 3, 4, not 5 or 6, or New Nightmare right now.
Me too. All right. Cheers, buddy.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.